Dave, are you here?
I am here. Yes, I am here. Sorry, I was trying to avoid going into a breakout room, which because I was super interested, and I thought, oh, I'll go, and then I thought that's probably a mistake, so I didn't go. But
So
I'm
first,
here.
thanks. I didn't see you come into the Zoom. So thank you so much for being here with us and for the sponsorship by Scrum.org. So Dave West is the CEO and product owner, right, at Scrum.org, frequent keynote speaker and a widely published author of articles and co-author of 2 books. And I guess you will talk to us today about
What
the
do you want to
new.
know? Oh, sorry.
I'm telling and asking simultaneously. And someone renamed you Limor, so nice to meet you, Dave /Limor.
It's an honor.
Oh yeah, who? Yes, I don't know how that happened.
So Dave West, stage is yours.
Okay, thanks everybody. As you can see, I'm going under a pseudonym. I always do that on a Sunday. Let me just share my screen so I've got something to talk at on this. Did that work? Hopefully you can all see it.
Scrum is still young, younger than us.
It is still younger than certainly how I feel. That's for sure. Yeah, so you can see the screen. Good. Well, thanks for inviting me. I know it's getting kind of late, isn't it, in Israel? I know, though, my only experience, I spent a week in Tel Aviv and visited Jerusalem. It was one of the most amazing trips that I've ever had for work. And I just remember that late doesn't apply in Israel. You sort of go out late, you know. I was always trying to go to bed at like midnight, and I was then dragged on to have hummus or to drink coffee, which is the worst time to do that ever.
This is not Israel, this is only Tel Aviv.
Oh, yes, actually in Tel Aviv. So thank you for inviting me today. So we've got a lot to talk about, and I'll see if I've got the energy to do it, but I'm going to do my best. We're going to talk about agility. We're going to talk about COVID-19. Oh my God, how it's affected the world and what we're seeing. You know, Scrum.org is in a very fortunate position because we have trainers throughout the world. We have 340 trainers, all of them quite vocal in their opinions. And so we have this sort of insight as to what's happening in many different parts of the world. And so I'm going to share some of that around COVID and some an economist that I love called Kalida Perez. I'm going to share some of her findings about it and what she talks about. And then I'm going to talk about Agile going 25, or sorry, Scrum going 25. Obviously, Agile is about to turn 20 this year, I guess, from the Agile Manifesto. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Scrum Guide, throw that in for good measure. So it's a little bit of a roller coaster of a talk. Let's see how it goes. Could go either way. Hopefully it goes a little bit better than my soccer team, Leicester City, who managed to lose today. So I'm hoping this is going to be better than that performance. Okay, so I speak quite a lot, right? Both at conferences and sometimes on my own in rooms like this. But in 2019 and the start of 2020, I was talking about change and about how it's so important and how organizations need to be ready for it and how, you know, even Amazon, even Facebook is in trouble, you know, when it comes to the ability to respond to the environment around them, and change is really hard, and I don't need to do that anymore. I think everybody understands that. You know, it's funny. The reality is, even Scrum.org, you know, we use Scrum, we're very agile. If I was in my office now, on one side of my office, and I've left it up on purpose really to remind me, is the roadmap for 2020. Yeah. Now, we did do some of the things on it, but there was this huge section that wasn't on it, responding to virtual training, responding to, you know, Black Lives Matter and some of the social justice that happened in the United States, but throughout the world, responding to, you know, our trainers' livelihoods being, you know, undermined and how could we help, and and also our students, it was it was a fundamentally different year than my roadmap, which is usually on my left, would have said. It was kind of shocking. The reality was that even Scrum.org, who's so agile, right? We deliver using sprints. We have a nice product goal or a series of product goals collected into a mission. We have all these things, but we were uh, we responded, but it was harder than we would have admitted. It was very stressful. I mean, it didn't help that my children were at home. My mum works in a supermarket in the UK. I was worried about her. Everything was happening at the same time, right? And I'm sure you went through that as well. I heard from our Israeli journalists exactly the same. It was a really scary moment. Even if we were equipped for it, I'm not sure we necessarily emotionally dealt with it. Now, the reality is uh, that COVID-19 is really, in my opinion, illustrative of the move that organizations are making to the post-industrial age, or the you could argue that the last age was the age of oil and mass production, right? We're really good at it. Look, I don't think we fight waterfall. I think we fight Taylorism. I don't think we fight hierarchies. I think we fight industrialism and this concept of breaking down things into small chunks, etc., and working on the task and management and all these things. Ultimately, I think we've learned with COVID-19 in particular as that sort of catalyst that we have to work in a different way if the environment we're working in is continuously changing. You can argue whether it's complex or just complicated. That would be another argument that our friends at Cynefin and the like would debate. But ultimately, the sheer amount of change and the sheer amounts of unknowns that popped up meant that we had to work in a very different way. And I think this is, and I agree with Cleda Perez, and this is a good friend of mine, Mick Curson, who wrote a book, Project to Product. He wrote a blog about this. I really believe this is the case, and that is illustrative. This moment is illustrative of that change. And an example, so McKinsey, we work with a lot, they did a study, and they found that they have 7 levels of leadership, the 7th level being the C levels, and the first level being somebody working on the sort of shop floor, as it were. They found that the communication between level 1s and 2s to level 1s and 2s to 6 and 7s increased like 207%, whereas the 4s and 5s and 4s and 5s, 3s stopped communicating with the tops and the bottoms. An entire sort of like strata of management was sort of put on the side, put on the bench, really, as the requirement to respond rapidly to the changing environment around us meant that the leaders had to get dirty and start providing direct direction to sales teams, to product teams, to customer support organizations. They had to get on in front of them and start making decisions on a day-to-day basis with their line managers. So you saw that, and McKinsey had the data to support that. And that was illustrative of this sort of like change, this fact that you got the teams now rapidly responding to the environment around them, and that you can't afford these very complicated communication processes, which are supposedly there to improve efficiency and make sure we're all aligned in the same direction. And sometimes it was incredibly chaotic. I know, and about you, but if you tried to postpone a flight or deal with a hotel, they were responding, but it was challenging, right? You sort of were on hold for a long time. Their policy changed during the conversation. You're like, oh, okay. And it was a little bit interesting. And so the last, I guess now 10 months have been this sort of like this, instead of this nice, when we're building something, we have this nice level of not knowing, and then it gets knowing, and then we can start becoming an efficient, and then little things happen as we release and make more changes. We live in this sort of more chaotic world of continuous change. At Scrum.org, we moved to live virtual classes, and we took advantage of our trainer community to sort of develop that. We use a steward model, GitHub, and internally, and we, use the class materials. We use GitHub issues to track changes. We use Slack to gather all that information. we leveraged all of that continuously. And it meant that literally sometimes the class was changing as people were delivering it. We're getting feedback. People were attending other people's classes. We were rapidly sharing and disseminating that information to the community. It was a really interesting time, incredibly stressful, but ultimately we were changing continuously in response to the environment around. Should it be 4 hours? Should it be 2 hours a class? Those sort of decisions were being made very quickly. And you know, this world of change, I really has reinforced the power of Scrum and the power of this very, very lightweight framework. Immaterial as if you call it Scrum or doing Scrum. I'm not a religious Scrum type person. I don't wear sandals and a robe. I believe in its practicality. I'm sort of more of a practical Scrum user, as it were, based on my experience. So this, ability to make things transparent, to then plan what you're going to do, and in the case of incredibly changeable world, that planning can be quite a small period, or if it's a little bit more stable, can be a longer period. Focus on that. Meet daily to talk about what the heck happened yesterday to help us plan where we're going, and then at the end review, retro, and then improve the plan. It's as simple as that. And it, over the last 25 years, I think its utility has proved its success. And over the last 10 months, I have seen examples of where Scrum really has been incredibly useful. And a case in point, the Broad Institute is an organization. They map the human genome and all that stuff, So they're this genetics organization, right? They use Scrum a lot. And they have an incredibly articulate Scrum Master who has presented many times. You should, if you're into biotech, she's like awesome. And so they decided on, I think it was early March last year, that they needed to do more testing initially for their own staff, because many of the things that they were working on required them to come into a lab. So they wanted to ensure they had a safe environment around that. But then they realized that they live in a community and they wanted that community to be safe as well. So they literally built in 5 days, using Scrum, Kanban, persistence, lots of swearing. They built a COVID-19 test lab because they're good at genetic testing, right? They kind of do it. They'd never done it with dangerous things like this before. So they built that. And the reason why it's very personal to me is my youngest, Harry, who's just turned 5, is preschool, wanted obviously to get kids that are 4 or 5 need to be with virtual really doesn't work. So they needed a test solution to ensure some stability and some predictive knowledge around the environment of the preschool and the whole school. And so they took advantage of that. Whereas my eldest, they didn't. And it's just interesting. That is the power of Scrum. Now, what could they have done it without Scrum? Of course they could. Is it that Scrum Master, Agile coach that was really pivotal and she just used a few tools, Scrum being one of them? Yeah, maybe. I don't mind. But it opened up her to be able to do that with the team. And effectively, they delivered 5 days 5-day sprint. Actually, I think it was a day-by-day sprint, it seemed like. I don't know, but interesting story. So Scrum has turned.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Do you want to refer to some questions in the chat now or later?
Oh, well, I don't know. I know we have a breakout room later, but I mean, it'd be awfully late at night to do it for you. But I mean, we could, sure, we can have a question now. Let's just do one. How about that? I can't see the questions, obviously.
So let's start with the last one. Did they want the community to be safe or safe like schedule framework?
Oh, no, not safe. Yes, that was a little bit of irony, wasn't it? Yes, I get it. No, they wanted it to be safe, as in they wanted more improved knowledge around who'd got COVID and who hadn't, I think. They did not want to use a Scaled Agile framework. Not there's anything wrong with a Scaled Agile framework. I'd like to put that on the table. It certainly, has some incredibly useful elements, but no, this was a different kind of safe, as it were.
Okay. So
okay.
okay.
Shall we do one more? We could do one more question if that's if there's one that's sort of hot that needs to be asked.
So let me read Jose Casal question. Middle management often is created to respond to poor communication, lack of focus, lack of visibility, and handle dependencies. In a moment of crisis, we often regain the focus, communication, and visibility purpose, right? Which could
Yes.
make okay.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, why does middleman, why do these, why do you have these massive hierarchies of management? And there's lots of reasons. Some of it is because of HR issues. You have to have, line managers in your country. You have to be able to do the quarterly review, to fill in forms. You have to have somebody to report to do your expenses, etc. Some of it is about basically, sort of amplifying and information, etc. But the problem is when you're in this environment where you can't afford the time it takes to manage this very efficient process of information information sort of distribution. When you can't be as in that, when you've got these rapid times, and also focus is I think that's a really good point, Jose. That focus, luckily focus is really clear. Keep the company alive. Let's make sure we serve our customers. Focus becomes much easier. So you just can't afford these big gaps. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with middle management. However, it would appear in crisis that the benefits of those sort of you end up with the leaders coming straight into the teams, which is exactly, it's funny. It reminds me of Ken Schwaber. There's many stories, obviously. He's my boss, and you can imagine what that's like, trying to be the product owner when the guy that invented it is sort of knocking on the door. It's a little embarrassing at times. But he tells me of two stories. One about and I'll share one now. I haven't got time for the other one actually. Federal Bureau. There was this thing called the Sentinel program, and the FBI was very regional. They had each individual area had its own computer system and managed its own suspects and all that sort of stuff. And they're trying to centralize it. It was called the FBI Sentinel program. And it had been going for years and years and years and years and years and years and failed horribly. They had hundreds of people. They were spending millions of dollars. So luckily they ran out of money. So they shrunk the team to about 25, 50 people. 25 actually was the start. And Ken came in and said, because they were using object-oriented software stuff, and he came along and basically by combination of focus and crisis, they focused and delivered something relatively quickly while they hadn't managed to do it previously. And I think that has a huge impact. And it certainly had a huge impact on Ken, that he saw how valuable focused teams could be. And so obviously he wrote it up in 95 in this first Scrum paper 25 years ago. Notice Scrum is in uppercase. I asked him, why is it in uppercase? He said, because nobody had heard of it then, so I had to shout. Which I thought was fun. It's about, remember when Jira used to be in uppercase for the same reason? I remember that. And it was over 100 pages long, this description. And if you looked at it today, you would think it was more like, dare I say it, some more comprehensive software development process like RUP or something like that. And remember, that was the biggest competitor in 95. And I happened to be the product manager for it in 97, I think I took over that job. So funny, hey? Coincidence. So that was when it was initially published at UPSLA, the object-oriented conference in Austin, Texas. And in those 25 years, it's gone from that hundreds and hundreds of paper to something much smaller and more focused and less practices described in it. And it's been successful, I think, because of you all. Over 500,000 people have been trained on it. There's 100 books with Scrum in the title or the subtitle, part of that thing. Forms the basis of majority of agile approaches, including SAFe. You'll notice it in the bottom left. It's very small, but it is there. And I think its success is really illustrative of the fact that everybody that hasn't been part of it wants to bash it, which I think is illustrative of its success, right? And the Scrum Guide is available and just come out a new version, 18th of November 2020. We relaunched, well, Jeff and Ken did, we just helped oil the wheels, really, the launch of the Scrum Guide. And if you want to find lots of updates, you can, lots written about it. I'm just going to basically say what they said and just highlight some of the sort of highlights. And the reason why, and I think it all sort of ties back to this complexity, the essence of Scrum is this very simple, lightweight process. And the Scrum Guide has over its sort of life got bigger, got more prescriptive, added more detail, and has sort of lost sight. Well, Jeff and Ken believed it had lost sight. So this was a major update, but Scrum didn't change. It's funny, you can change, it's a major update of Scrum, of the Scrum Guide, but Scrum at its heart didn't change. The focus was making it less prescriptive. So things like the 3 questions were dropped, the desire to always have a process improvement out of a retrospective that you do in the next sprint. Now, those 2 things could be still very, very useful, and you should think about doing them, but they're not necessary to be Scrum. The other thing that was interesting about the change was one team focused on one product. And actually a little bit of, we updated the PSM1 class and assessments and body of knowledge around PSM, Professional Scrum Master. And so a lot of people have been taking the new version of the test. And I've noticed a problem, actually. In fact, we had to add some additional sort of like reminders prior to the test, update it a little bit, because people kept getting it wrong when we asked who is responsible for the product. Everybody wanted to say the product owner, everybody wanted to say the organization, the stakeholders, the customer, but really it's the Scrum team. The Scrum team releases an incremental change to the product. We have one team focused on the product, incrementally delivering value against that. Inside there, we have a series of accountabilities, the developers being one set of accountabilities, but Scrum Master and Product Owner being another set. They're part of this team. Everybody is about delivering value. Yes, the product owner comes in with a different set of accountabilities around the order of that value. What's first? What should we do first? Let's have some clarity on what value means in that context. Who knows about it from an external thing? What stakeholders? But the development team also are responsible for that. Responsible for taking that value and making it real. The Scrum Master, though, they come with an additional set of responsibilities about making things transparent, making the workflow, making Scrum be visible to the team and to the external people that are working with that team. Ultimately, they're still accountable for the value that team's delivering. So the product goal was added, new artifact, which is really, really groovy, because what I've always found interesting when I visit great Scrum teams, of which there are so many around, I see great like burn downs, I see boards, maybe they're using Kanban, so you got aging, cumulative flow, this sort of stuff. Awesome. But I don't often see the customer and the goal on the wall. I don't see that clearly articulated value that we're trying to achieve, of which a sprint and the sprint goal is a subset of that, an incremental move towards that. I don't often see those clear guardrails for a self-managing team to organize around. I don't often see that clarity provided by an organization on what are we trying to achieve. And I think that sort of harks back to a fundamental problem that we have with Scrum. Well, maybe it's not a problem, but it is something how it's used. A lot of organizations use Scrum to get work done. It's a very effective way of doing that. A product owner really is just the project manager who's basically making sure the right work is being done in the right order. The team's focused on the work. They have trouble articulating the sprint goal because the sprint goal really is just do the work. Their product backlog keeps changing as new work comes in, which they're not really part of. But that's often how Scrum's used. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but the problem with that is it doesn't unlock the power of the individuals in this team focused on a customer, focused on a product, focused on a goal, because amazing things can happen, as the Broad Institute illustrated. Building a COVID-19 test lab in 5 days can't have been easy. I mean, how do you bring these samples in? What happens if they get dropped on the floor? Where's the coffee machine going to go? All those things are hard, right? So along with product goal, there was a clearer sort of restructuring around sprint goal definition and product goal, meaning these are commitments to the artifact. So product goal is a commitment to the product backlog. Definition done is a commitment to the increment, and obviously the sprint is the sprint goal, or the sprint backlog sprint goal is part of that. Self-managed over self-organized, I think that's a little bit of semantics, but a lot of people got very emotionally tied up with that. Bottom line is, you need your team to have the freedom that's appropriate and possible to really decide how they're going to do the work. That's the bottom line. Now, in some situations, that means they'll hire and they'll have complete carte blanche over things like bonus and money and all that, salaries. In other situations, are more often the case, they won't have those controls, but they'll have controls over who's doing what, when, and they'll be able to change that as necessary. And then, simplification of the language. That's really ultimately. Now, there's a lot been written about it. If you're interested in it, go to scrum.org or one of the Scrum organizations. I'm sure you can find lots about it. I'm excited because what it's reminded everybody of is that Scrum is a framework that needs to be instantiated. Just the change of the roles to accountabilities kind of said, yes, you can have the job title, product owner, Scrum Master, even developer, but it's not enough. Your job title is an instantiation of the accountabilities that the Scrum Guide has, and probably lots of other things as well. Think about it as a framework. It's a framework that needs to be instantiated in your context because, work's complicated. A little bit more details on that. You can see, I'm not going to bore you. Free accountabilities, yes. Developers. Oh yeah, so development team's gone. I kind of forgot that. Yeah. So there was one thing that I never really liked in Scrum, this idea. I can see why we had it, but I was like, this idea that you have a development team and then they're part of a bigger Scrum team where the Scrum Master and product owner live, but really it's the development team that do all the work, right? Now the Scrum Masters on this call are going, no, well, but so this idea of sort of like separation of concern was valuable, I think, to some extent, but also got in the way. A large petrochemical company said to me, hey, how should we measure our Scrum Masters? I said, well, do they work with multiple teams? Maybe we can use the success of those teams. Well, no, they don't want to be measured on that. They want to be measured on team engagement. They want to be measured on how well people are doing Scrum. They have an assessment. They want to be, well, that sounds a bit silly. Surely value is ultimately the ultimate measure, and something we should encourage. It doesn't mean we can't use other pieces of data to help us better refine our understanding of our contribution and retrospect on it, but ultimately the success is ultimately about the value the teams deliver. Yeah, anyway, so a few things happen to the Scrum Guide, right? But Scrum is still Scrum. It's still empirical. And when we say empirical process, this process emerges, the idea that you are ultimately delivering stuff so that you learn more about it, so you then can improve your understanding to deliver more stuff. You're in this sort of empiricism or empirical scientific method kind of loop. Now, slightly different to scientific method because we're not trying to prove we're wrong always, but which it seems to be how scientific method works. But it is very much focused on this sort of this learning, exploration learning, and then self-managed, empowered teams. We all get that, right? That idea that the teams can do what they need to do to get the work done. The power of that is just amazing. Absolutely amazing. And then this idea that we're continuously improving, improving the product and improving how we're working. We're continually stepping back and going, could we do that better? That's all Scrum is. Simple as that, right? Hard to do for so many reasons, but it's as simple as that.
Could you elaborate about the difference between the self-managed and self-organized? It's a question from the chat.
Yeah, so I'm probably not the best person to do this, and you probably do a much better job than me on it. But I was in some of these calls when Jeff and Ken talked about this. So self-organized. So frankly, I don't have the same emotional connection to either words. Self-organizing, some people think is much bigger, some people think is much smaller. I think the reason why the change happened was because what it's trying to highlight is that the team can manage all of the things necessary to deliver a valuable, useful increment. So basically, now, does that mean there's the need for managers? I don't know. I don't know your context, but what I do know is the team has to have the power, not just to organize, which is who does what, but how they do it, how they work with each other, how they collaborate, who's all of the things necessary that may historically be called management to get the product out, to deliver incremental value. Of course, in some situations, that might mean that, so for instance, I was the chief product owner and chief product officer, sorry, and head of engineering and all at this company called TaskTop. And so when we started, we had one Scrum team. It was awesome, actually, best times. Then we got funding a few times, grew to 5, grew to 8. When we had one Scrum team, they hired, they interviewed, they did all of that stuff. The bonus that we never ever managed to attain, but we believed we were going to once, was attributed to everybody. It was a very dynamic, almost heuristic, very much a bureaucracy kind of, not quite as much as that, but very nice and friendly world. When we grew to 8 teams, we had to bring in a couple of middle managers to effectively do hiring and stuff like that. Was that a mistake? Maybe, maybe not. We made a decision that we kept the teams focused on delivering value, and we then had a bunch more customers than we had at the start, so we were having to deliver a lot more. So we took those responsibilities out of the team. So the essence really is, in my opinion, it isn't, one of these classic definitions of self-managed versus self-organized that we really need to care about with the change. The change was inspired by the fact that, to remind you, that the team has to be able to manage all the things necessary to deliver a valuable increment. And depending on your situation, that will change. And I think that's what it means. Hopefully, does that make sense? Yeah?
Yeah, thank you very much.
It is a tricky one because so when I was the product manager, I learned a very important thing I'm going to share now. The difference between a terrorist and a methodologist is you can reason with a terrorist. Methodologists, particularly around things like self-managed, impact, self-organized, they come with these bodies of knowledge, like, well, look at this, and there's a quote. And sometimes we get bogged down in that, when really we need to step back and say, hey, why are we doing it? Why, and the motivation, I think, was inspired by that. Cool. Let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about how you make Scrum successful, and what we're seeing now, even more so in this sort of like COVID world where we've got this very different organization. We're seeing this thing we call it professionalism at scrum.org. I don't know why it's called professionalism. I inherited it, we'll see. But whatever you want to call it, these 4 things that really are super, super interesting. Values and behavior. You need to have, and this is certainly true when you're like remote, disconnected, and you're trying to collaborate on creative work. Understanding, sort of like trusting people, having that level of psychological safety, having the level of respect, those things become super, super important. Knowing that, yes, I know that person had to leave because their kid needed some help, but they'll come back. I respect them. I trust them. Those sort of things become super important. Disciplined and focused. One thing that I've seen over and over again with great Scrum teams is, in spite of the complexity around them and the chaos around them, they're very disciplined and focused on actually delivering the work, whether it's, acceptance criteria to a story or something, or whether it's to fix they focus on it and they do it, which is great. They care about a customer, they're outcome oriented. It's so easy, particularly when it's very intellectual work. I know, let's build a model about a model. You get very focused on the thing and you forget about the outcome. And then lastly, and I think that was the previous presenter was talking a little bit about this, is that sort of like the desire to help others get better, the desire to be sharing and caring. And I saw this in our community over the last year that I didn't believe. Sometimes these trainers are competing, right? Goes without saying. But I've never seen people help each other as much as I've seen, people from the trainers in the UK who are literally competing for the same clients would stop and help each other because then, this one trainer had never delivered a virtual class before. So the trainer that did helped them. Seeing that sort of helping each other get better at their craft, delivering value, being available to do that is an incredible thing, but I think necessary.
Dave, another question, if you may. After the question of team cohesive, there's a question from a leader. What is the difference between true leader and a servant leader?
And you'll notice that servant leader was kind of got rid of the Scrum guy. Oh, you're picky. I get it. So the reason why servant leader was removed from the Scrum Guide wasn't because we don't believe in servant leadership and the ideas of servant leadership. The reason why it was removed from the Scrum Guide is that a lot of people read that without actually knowing what servant leadership was, and then they treat the Scrum Master like a secretary and a servant. Can you organize that meeting? Can you run the facilitation? Can you document it? Can you update the mural board? They became like that. So Ken and Jeff didn't like that. And that was something we were seeing with Scrum Masters, that they were sort of being relegated to this chief admin and secretary, and those sort of words were being used. So not that behavior changes because we remove something in the Scrum Guide, don't get me wrong. However, the word servant is less important than the word leader. And yes, a good leader, which a Scrum Master hopefully is, leads by, using many different stances and often gives more than they receive and helps other people. They're the people, in that army obstacle course, and I know many of you have been through this in Israel. You got these big walls, and I would not know what to do. The guy at the bottom that gets trodden on a lot? That's a great servant leader, right? Come on, everybody, let's go up here. We've got to go up this wall, tread on my head. And as a tall person, that probably would work. I've got quite a flat head, so I'd like to be a win-win for me, right? But and I think that really is the essence. Obviously, all the work around servant leadership, around how you can come to a conversation in a different way, how you can lead by example rather than all of this sort of stuff, be vulnerable, it's still super, super important. But ultimately, that's why it was changed in the guide. If that's what you were sort of asking about. Ken hates the word servant, actually. He's like, don't be silly. That sounds like you're subservient to everybody else. You're not. You lead, you help. Can you imagine Ken Schwaber or any of the people that signed the Agile Manifesto as servants? No, they're leaders. Now, sometimes they do it by creating psychological safety and, et cetera, et cetera. Talking of safety, let's talk about values. This was added in 2017 to the guide. And I was surprised it wasn't dropped. There was actually an interesting conversation because it is prescriptive, right? It is, you can do Scrum without the values as described in the Scrum Guide. To be successful with Scrum, you need the values. And I think this is illustrative of the fact that this is so important, this behavioral element. Whether you pick these values is your own choice. And probably something you should decide on yourself. But ultimately, that creating that focus, creating that courage and respect, for the courage to be honest and open about your weaknesses, respect for each other, so you go into it in this place, is super important. Now, these are easy to say, but very hard to do. And I speak from personal experience as sometimes a little bit bombastic in style and very, I'd argue, passionate, although people would say arrogant. It's up to your perspective. So sometimes I override people, and sometimes that I don't give as much respect as I should, and I'm not as open as I could be. Luckily, I've got 340 trainers that remind me of my weaknesses on a daily basis. But this is hard. But you need to create that environment around psychological safety. If you're interested in some of the other work, obviously Google Aristotle project is really interesting. And some of the work we did with McKinsey on some studies on this that really emphasize the fact that that's important. And here's the McKinsey study that we did. And what we found, what was really, really interesting is, yes, and as opposed to yes, but. The most successful teams that we talked to were the ones that had an environment where they were psychologically safe. Google proved this in Project Aristotle, which was really embarrassing because we could have saved a lot of research by actually just reading theirs. But often we look to get these sort of like heroes in our teams. And sometimes a hero has become super successful themselves. They haven't got necessarily all of the traits necessary to help others. So you get this really good person in your team, but unfortunately the whole team doesn't benefit from it. And so we talk a lot about that in this paper on McKinsey, and I'm worried about a team. And here's the Google example. This was taken from the New York Times Magazine. Gosh, which means it must be true, right? It's in the New York Times Magazine, which is awesome. So interesting. So values. All right, so we've got empiricism, self-organization, continuous improvement. We start wrapping them, and we're seeing more importance in this. And COVID has sort of heightened this. You know, the environment that we create for our teams and for our developers in teams, our people in teams. You know, having that value, having that environment be psychologically safe and being focusing on the right things is crucial. Discipline becomes super important though next. And we all know what a discipline is. Yeah, martial arts, kata, and all that sort of stuff. What's interesting is when I see Scrum not going well, where I see zombie Scrum happening, as Barry and Christian talk about, and the new book talks about, it's when done isn't really done, when WIP limits aren't enforced, where everything's just about to be done but never quite done, when, you know, when improvement doesn't happen, even though there's a big list of improvements that come out of every retro, when we inspect but we don't adapt, when cards don't describe outcomes, they just describe work, when, you know, when work comes in, when the backlog continuously changes, the sprint backlog continuously changes during the sprint, more stuff comes in from I don't know where, and when the daily scrum isn't at the same time even every day. Now, obviously, you have to use your intelligence and your judgment, but the reality is that it's a slippery slope as some of these discipline elements start going. And it becomes harder and harder to be effective in this world, particularly in this world that's in this continuous feeling of change. You know, by just spending the time to make sure your cards have clear success criteria in them, by spending the time where you understand what done means for this sprint maybe, or for this increment, spending your time ensuring that work doesn't just batch up in the middle of your process, ensuring the daily scrum actually happens, ensuring that, you know, that the backlog is relatively stable during a sprint, and putting things off to the next sprint. All those things become important. Just try that discipline, step back from the process and ensure you're doing that. Because if you don't, what it ends up being, it starts breaking down. The industrial system assumed that nobody knew what they were doing and nobody trusted anybody. And I know that's an extreme, but it was. We're in an empowered team environment. That means we have to trust people. That means we have to respect that they're going to do what they say they're going to do. That means we have to be open to do frequent inspection, and that needs to actually happen. It means we have to have a clear definition of done, a clear definition of a sprint goal, you know, with success criteria in each card or product backlog item. Everybody ultimately is responsible for that discipline. A manager is not going to, basically, it's not like trying to get away with stuff in front of your mum and dad. You know, back in those days, work isn't like that. They trust you, they give you the freedom, because that empowers you to deliver amazing things. Outcomes. Talked a little bit about that. So we've got values, we've got discipline. Now let's talk briefly about outcomes, because I know I haven't got long. Remember that a lot of the work you do, apparently, according to this survey, has no value at all. Makes things worse, does nothing. So what we want to try to do is we try to focus everybody on the outcome. And that's ultimately some state change experienced by the user of the product in some way. You know, ultimately, what we tried to do, and we did it with a Scrum Guide here, is we try to articulate that in an effective way. This is the ultimate set of outcome that I'm trying to achieve. It provides the why. There's only one at a time. It doesn't mean it can't change as we better understand. It's a commitment to the product backlog. And every day, we should be reviewing what we're working on and doing that. Ken does that at the mission level for our organization. How is this helping to help people and teams solve complex problems more? If you can't articulate that, you're in trouble. And that then manifests itself in planning. In 2020, we now ask this first question that we ask, okay, why is this sprint? What are we going to do that's valuable this sprint? What's the focus of our sprint? How can we do it? And let's choose the work to get that done. It's as simple as that. That's the change that's in the 2020 guide to support that idea. That means that customers need to be front and center more than they've ever been before. And I always try to, in my product goal, clearly articulate who it's for, who the work we're doing is for, what's the outcome and the problem that we're trying to satisfy. Focus on outcomes, provide a value-based sort of environment to do it in, and be disciplined in the execution. The last element is community. It's interesting, the organizations that I think scale agile the most effectively isn't because of the frameworks they're using. They might be using SAFe, they might be using less, they might have a bit of Nexus, you know, all these different things. What's the most important thing that they've seemed to have managed or grappled with is the ability to build community and to have people that have experienced a wow moment, share that wow moment and help others do that. So they ask a very simple question. Oops, I don't want to do that, which is not what have I done today, but who have I helped today? So everybody, and this is Toyota is a great example. Everybody in Toyota has a little amount of time, not for their day-to-day work, but their work with others, and they spend time doing that. And obviously Spotify, famous, they've institutionalized this, and you could argue if it is real or if this isn't real, immaterial of exactly what they're doing. The intention of this concept of chapters and guilds is to build a formal structure around helping each other outside of the squad or the Scrum team, which are predominantly focused on the product and the goal, have time to support each other in pursuit of technical excellence, getting better, solving problems, etc. And that means organizations have adopted this sort of skill-based community. And so I think that is something that organizations are wrestling with at the moment. As COVID has shown us, you know, we need to have a support network. And sometimes that support network, you know, is our PST community, or it's your Israel, Agile Israel, or whatever. But having that support network has meant so much more when you're trapped in a room this big. The children keep coming in and annoying you in. So I think that's something that's interesting. And then one more thing. How do you prove you've succeeded? So, and this is something we've been wrestling with at scrum.org, measuring success. And some of you may be aware of EBM, and we launched a new assessment towards the end of last year. Not a class is coming, but there's a bunch of classes that our PSTs deliver, and we didn't know which ones we wanted to sort of like take from, so we're letting it sort of organically happen. But EBM is what's EBM's provided us with is this mechanism, this framework to start thinking about value and outcomes in a more successful way. And really it's spread into two: market value, our current value and how much we're not delivering value on, and then organizational capability, which is basically how much can I innovate and how often do I release stuff. And if you start thinking about those things in unison and sort of taking a step back from the outcomes of your product teams and the value that they're delivering, you really start to re-pivot to an outcome-based rather than a work-based organization. I know a lot covered. I'm sorry. I know it's been a roller coaster ride, but if you bring that all together, you get something that looks a bit like this. You get that core bit of Scrum in the middle, which is 25 years old and still rocking. You get that professionalism around the edge, values, customer discipline, values, outcome, discipline, learning, stroke community. And then you get that measurement framework around that. That's what I think the future of Scrum is. We're going to continuously at scrum.org add more stuff that either builds bridges to organizations that help us think about, say, outcomes or values or discipline or community. We're going to continuously refine a better understanding of EBM and what outcomes really mean as we move forward. And, at the end of the day, this is what it's all about, right? The Scrum Guide's back to its roots to better support us. One team focused on a goal, empowered to make decisions, and always getting a little bit better. And that meant that we at Scrum.org had to change our mission to helping people and teams solve complex problems. Because there's another thing that happened in the Scrum Guide update. We moved away from a focus on software because honestly, the most interesting problems that we're going to solve in the next 10, 15, 20 years, and the most interesting problems that we've learned about during COVID aren't just software problems. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Whew. Hopefully that was okay and
Just
enjoyable. And I tried to hit my time box because I know you probably want to go out and start drinking and eating at this time, so.
Especially in the COVID era.
Only thing we have done this day.
I'm sorry about the COVID era, yes.
Boaz, would you like to share your drawing?
Boaz was drawing in parallel while you were speaking.
I'll stop sharing, sorry.
And in the meantime, if you want to grab a question from the chat, perfectly okay. Whatever you want, just pick one, because we are just
sharing the right screen.
Oh my God, there's loads. Oh my God, that's an awesome drawing. That's.
I did most of it, and Boaz
did some.
Only did the W in the upper left. I did most of it.
Isn't it interesting how when you see somebody that's obviously got a lot of talent, it just makes you realize how untalented you really are.
You do this to us all the time.
And the only reason I came here today is that Dave West would say this.
I wish. I just
did my day's mission. That's it. It's okay.
Well, then that's good. But that is an awesome. Okay, so somebody asked about empiricism and safetiness from the stakeholders. When the stakeholders say, no, we know exactly what we want, and it's this, and we want to get it done as quickly as possible. Stop mucking about and just tell us how long it's going to take, etc. So one of the hardest jobs as a Scrum Master, so hard I would never try to do it, is to coach the organization that has got a mindset around delivering work in a very industrial fashion, to coach them to think about solving problems, delivering value in a different fashion. That's incredibly hard to jump to. And I don't have any answers other than you sort of have to just go, okay, how about we just deliver this to you first and see how you find it? You have to sort of like demonstrate the success of working in this way. And then slowly over time, you move them towards this thinking. I think that executives get it. I think the problem is those amorphous blob of middle managers, and I'm not got anything against middle managers, historically have been managing to a different rhythm. And then they're sort of like concerned as to how they fit now. So one benefit of when there's a large amount of complexity and chaos in the world is we get the opportunity to deliver frequently because we have to. And then that gives us the ability to reframe what success means to our stakeholders. That would be my take on that very, very deep question that we could probably talk for hours about.
Yes, so Dave, I want to thank you very, very much. We have no time, unfortunately, for other questions.
I know, sorry.
And no, it was great. It was great. And thank you for answering. We asked for it. And so we want to thank you. This is the last lecture of today.
You're the closing.
Yes, the closing lecture of today. And so thank you, and thanks Scrum.org for sponsorship this great conference. I'm really excited to have you here with us.
Well,
today.
thank you for inviting me. And next time, can we just do it in person in Israel? It would be just so much, particularly in January.
Consider it done. I already promised you before the best falafel in Israel, so I remember that.
I don't know. I've got my friend Raziel believes there's a certain falafel
I know
shop.
Raziel, don't worry about him. And I will show you the best one.
Well, that's good. I'm looking forward to falafel.
Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Do I have to go to a breakout room? Is that the rules, or is not? Are we not doing breakout rooms?
Finishing now.
Oh, we're finishing. Well, it is 9 o'clock, right? So, all right, then we'll bye, everybody. Have a fantastic day. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Yeah.